Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, adepts, friends, fans, family, and followers to Season 3, Episode 11, the season finale of the hit underground occult radio show known as Knights of the Nephilim, brought to you by Celestial Oddities and the Coterie of Samil Arcane Occult Order, bringing you 100% real and raw underground entertainment and teachings. As always, if you're listening out there, please make sure to click the like, share, and follow button on whatever platform you're listening in from, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google Play, or Amazon Podcasts, or hell, any of the ones in between that I might have missed. We air across absolutely everywhere, so feel free to share it around and click those buttons. Helps move us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives. Not only of this show here, Knights of the Nephilim, based upon esoteric science, occult doctrine, and ritual magic, bringing on and interviewing and talking with the biggest and best names in occultism, from ritual practitioners and authors to tool makers and theologians, or it be one of our other shows, like Celestial Oddities, The Pong, Pair of Normal Guys, where we deep dive into subject matter of supernatural and paranormal phenomena, interview professionals within the field, and do our Oddworld special episodes where we take on phone calls from people just like you around the world to hear your extraordinary and unexplainable stories of supernatural phenomena. We also have Uncovering the Underground, where we interview and talk with artists from music to modeling, stars of the big screen, comedy, oddities, and everything in between. So we're always bringing you something new here, something fresh. We are each and every week. In the weeks in between, for anybody that's new to the show, we do air every other Thursday night, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then in the weeks between, staggered, is the Pair of Normal Guys podcast. So we stagger them back and forth, back and forth. This week is our season finale of Knights of the Nephilim Season 3. Next week is our season finale of the Paranormal Guys podcast, Season 3. Both of those shows will be coming back later in 2023. We'll take a little bit of a break, align some new guests for the upcoming season, some new topics and discussions. That's where we love to hear from you guys and gals out there. You can send us an email at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that's celestialoddities@gmail.com. Let us, know who you want to see have on the show, Anything you want to see us do differently, or any input that you have. We always love to hear from each and every one of you. So don't be shy to reach out to us and let us know what you want to see on the upcoming seasons. If you are listening out there and you go through Spreaker, that is spelled Spreaker. That is our hosting platform, our hosting site. You can go through Spreaker.com or through the Spreaker app in the app market. And that will not only allow you to listen to the show, but does allow you to leave us comments or ask our weekly guests questions that we will read off on the air for you to get to know our guests a little bit better. So feel free to join us, on any of our episodes and do so. We always like crowd participation, so that's one way that you can do so. We would like to thank our sponsors, Arsenosis, Goetic Impressions, Limitless Liberations, The Telemancer, Arachne Arcane Services, and Belladonna's Botanicals for everything that they do for the show. Tonight, throughout the episode, we will take mini breaks to let you hear a little bit about who they are, what they do, where you can check them out at. And if we have any promo codes, certainly hook you guys up with something to save you on your next order, whether it be for you or for someone that you love. Make sure you support people out there doing great work like every one of these companies. Now, tonight I'm excited. Not only is it the season finale, it's always fun to wrap up another season of great guests. We had a wonderful time this year. If you missed any of the episodes, jump back. Just phenomenal conversations and people that we've had on the show. Been very fortunate to get to meet every one of these, gentlemen and ladies out there that we've had on. Pick their brains, find out about what their beliefs are, and jump into the mechanics of magic, what we all love. And tonight is not only, certainly one of those guests, but it's actually someone that I am very, very excited to bring on, someone who I look up to as being a pivotal person in the occult world, and that is Frater Barrabbas. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Frater here in just a moment, and then we'll go ahead and bring him on. I'm going to read to you in his words. Frater Barrabbas, witch, ritual magician, occultist, and author. While there might be a lot of individuals out there who are a lot like me, at least superficially, I believe that I am one of the few who has successfully merged witchcraft magic with ceremonial magic to produce a unique system of ritual magic. I started my path many years ago in the early 1970s when Western culture was gripped by a kind of rediscovery of Western occultism and Eastern religious philosophy. And he certainly does that across the different books that he puts out. There's no one else like him that I've come across, and I read consistently all the time. His books bring on a new perspective and a way of doing ritual magic that I have not seen anybody else produce or bring forward, and that's what we're going to jump into tonight, as well as some conversation about Enochian magic and also the Nephilim giants. So it's going to be very, very interesting. So as always, grab your ceremonial attire, grab your athames. Let me actually jump back a little bit. And real quick, before I actually start, I would like to say if my voice cuts in and out, guys, I already apologize to Frater Barrabbas, but I'll apologize to you guys. I have a very, very nasty ear infection right now that just kind of sprung up out of nowhere, and my voice has been a little bit rough, and I have to keep clearing my throat, and it's messing me up a little bit talking. So I do apologize. Of all times, the season finale, but we're going to stick through it. So let's try that again and say, grab your ritual athames, put on your ceremonial attire, light your candles and focus your desires. Step into the circle and intone the sacred names. Give offering and praise as we stare into the flames and conjure the spirit that is Frater Barrabbas.
What's locked behind that door?
Horror. No normal mind can imagine. Something even more terrible than you.
Now I'm a default friend. Like all quantities, horror has its ultimate. And I'm that.
There is a horror beyond yours. And it's in there. Locked behind that door.
All right, everybody, we are live this evening with the one and only Frater Barrabbas. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight, brother.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you making time for us to be able to pick your brain this evening, speak, about your profound knowledge in occultism that expands, at this point, 50 years worth of research. You've put your time and certainly paid your dues. And I look forward to finding out a little bit more of how you came about your structure and the knowledge that you have. And I usually start out all my shows very traditionally and ask, where did your journey begin? Where did you start your path into occultism and esoteric belief?
Well, let's see now. I was knee-high to a Mary sprat, and I started when I was a teenager. But we're talking about a teenager back in the 70s, so that was, quite a long time ago. And at that particular time, there was just a lot of people were into a lot of stuff. They were into Eastern traditions and astrology. And Gerald B. Gardner had a couple of his books out on witchcraft. And I was basically, a seeker. I was probably in my early teens and didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. But I just had this ability to sense things, to dream things in a precocious fashion that just made me, sort of different and odd. And when I came across witchcraft, it was like, wow, there's something about this. And there were some pivotal TV shows or movies on TV that I saw, like Ritual of Evil, which was, really a fascinating movie. You can actually still get a copy of it. And then, of course, Eye of the Devil with David Niven and Deborah Carr. These types of shows they really talk to me. And for some reason, I decided that there's got to be something there because I'm feeling something in my heart. And, we're talking about someone who was a teenager, and there weren't any covens, there weren't any organizations. Back in those days, if you read a book and you wanted to talk to somebody, you wrote letters. You put a stamp on it and dump it in the mail, and maybe you might get a response back at some point, who knows when. And there weren't really very many books that you could get. I'd go to the library, and all the books on witchcraft, the very few of them that they had were all checked out and never returned. So it was one of those situations where I didn't have much material, and so I had to use my imagination to create an awful lot. But I did have the capacity to encounter, perceive, and sense deity, as well as spirits. So I would, I'm sure that if a psychiatrist would have gotten a hold of me at that time, they probably would have classified me as borderline crazy. But it was just one of those things. I didn't talk about it much to other people because, they would think that I was a little strange, even though I was strange anyways. So, there were a couple of landmark books that I got a hold of. One was a book called, The Book of Shadows by Lady Sheba. And she published her Book of Shadows. It had everything in it except for the third degree great right. That was missing for some reason. But everything else was in there pretty much. And then another book by Paul Hewson called Mastering Witchcraft. And I believe that the Mastering Witchcraft book, I think you can still get a hold of it. Some years ago, one of my students actually got me a pristine copy of that book. So I was kind of like, wow. And then not too long after that came the book King of the Witches, which was about a witch named Alex Sanders. And Alex Sanders was pretty different and strange compared to all the other witches at that time, because he loved getting his face in the press, and his very, very young, barely old beautiful high priestess wife, Maxine, and their small coven, which eventually, because Alex was so eager to initiate anybody and everybody who came along, that there were almost, after a while, hundreds and hundreds of witches who basically had been initiated by him and his clan. And that happened in the United States, and the Alexandrian tradition began to, circulate from Boston, which is its point of origin, throughout the country. And I just so happens that when right after my 21st birthday, I got involved with an Alexandrian coven in the city of Milwaukee, and was initiated. And I went through all 3 degrees in about 18 months. Because I'd already been practicing for 5 years prior to that, and self-initiated everything else. So, but the really cool thing is because I just, I had some issues. I probably had ADHD. I'm pretty sure that I had a bit of ADHD. And so sitting down and reading the Golden Dawn and trying to figure out how the Golden Dawnites made magic without having access to Crowley's work on the same topic, I just got impatient with it, and I just used my imagination and what I knew about witchcraft and began to build my own system of magic. And whatever I saw was being accomplished in ceremonial magic, whether it was, using the pentagram and having a pentagram ritual, evoke elementals into manifestation, or, whether it was planetary magic and using the hexagram, which I later ditched for the septagram because I liked it so much better. It was cooler looking, I slowly, over time, built up a complete system of magic that did practically everything that most ceremonial magical systems do as well. But, the magic that I work is very witchcraft based. And that's because, I did borrow stuff from the Golden Dawn and from other sources, but it was really founded on a kind of witchcraft perspective of using a magic circle as a boundary between the domain of the profane and the sacred, and working with the energies and doing everything within the circle, including, evocation and working with spirits. Everything that is sacred, part of the magic, is in the circle. So I don't have these external circles, and the circle isn't used to protect me from evil spirits. It's used to enclose a sacred boundary. But at any rate, when I started to meet ceremonial magicians after a period of time, and I got involved with the OTO and all of that, one of the members of the OTO had looked over some of my material and said, I've looked over your magic. It stinks of witchcraft. And I basically felt, hey, yeah, it does. And instead of being insulted by that or hurt, I actually felt it was a badge of honor. Yes, my magic stinks of witchcraft, so there. But yeah, in the 1980s, some people came to me and asked me, hey, look, we want to put together a magical order, and we really admire the kind of magic that you work. Let's put together a magical order. So I had to take all the personal rituals that I had and rewrite them into a structure and a system that was accessible to other people. So it didn't have a lot of personalized, deities and other concepts in it. It was more based upon what I would consider to be, foundational occult principles and symbols and ideas and the Kabbalah and all that other stuff, so that they could look at this, individuals who had, basic occult knowledge and go, yeah, okay, And of course, it was all hands-on, so I basically taught them how to work magic from scratch. And it was a really successful organization. This was in Kansas City, Missouri. And it was an order that we named the Egregores Sancta Stella Gnostica, or the ESSG, or also known as the Gnostic Star. And that was a particular time when I got into two different things. One was gnosis, or Gnosticism, and the other thing I got into was the Enochian system of magic. And so, but once again, I kind of ignored the traditions and the way that things are done, and just sort of looked at this stuff and applied it to the materials and the rituals and the knowledge that I already had, and just built extensions onto what it was I was working with. I even work and with what I would call a magical mass and benediction rite, because the witchcraft coven that I was involved in, I referred to it as the coven from hell back in the 70s. The high priest also became a bishop in the old Catholic Church, which was kind of a thing. I mean, if you're familiar with Michael Pertot, Michael Pertot is very much into getting, episcopal lineages to add to his magical pedigree. Well, I managed to receive one of those, and I took the knowledge that I had received and created an entire sacramental theurgical system of magic that merged very nicely with the witchcraft magic that I was doing. So, I really exposed myself to a lot of different perspectives. There was only a few areas that I really wasn't too keen on. I wasn't too keen on spell work and hoodoo, although I do believe that those are very powerful systems of magic and quite legitimate. And I've had close friends who were, very much involved in voodoo and Santeria and Palo. So, but I kind of had my own path and my own thing and my own relationship with my gods and goddesses, and shared that knowledge with people on a sort of, egalitarian manner. And I've never been one for hierarchies. I just really despise them, and I've never been one for being a leader. I believe in being someone who shares knowledge and lore with somebody else, with the idea that they will share it with me. And I strongly believe in that everybody should have a peer group of people who can do a sanity check on anything that they think that they're about to do. But, I guess you could call me a tradition breaker because I've actually taken things like, the Sworn Book of Honorius or the Abramelin ordeal. I took the Abramelin ordeal and took it from a solar-based structure to a lunar-based structure, reduced the amount of time, and then packed it with all sorts of powerful magic. Basically invoking the seraphim and the cherubim, and basically came up with my own way of doing this. It does not detract from what other people have done if they're following, the book by Abraham the Jew on the Abramelin system of magic. I have a lot of respect for somebody who's willing to take 3 to 6 months out of their life to retire and not have anything to do with society. I've always been a poor working stiff, so I couldn't see myself doing that. And then, of course, some of the other rituals and ordeals that I've run across, I've also managed to find ways of pulling them into my system. So it's been quite an interesting adventure overall, but it's an adventure that has taken time, and because normally I'm busy with my day job, and whatever time I've got after the demands of working in an IT type job, then that's the time that I have to work on some of this stuff.
Well, no, I love that, because several things you said that I want to kind of circulate back on. You are working a 9-to-5 job, like you said. So for you to find the time to write what you have written is very impressive, because it's detailed work. It is not your run-of-the-mill, just I'm going to give you a broad outline of something. No, this, folks, if you're listening out there and you're not, privy to Frater Barrabbas' work, I suggest that you pick up one of his books. He has several, and you're going to find very detailed formulas of ritual magic. And like you said, there is Pelamayombe, there is Santeria, there's different types of magic out there that are very powerful, but that wasn't your path. Your path was taking ceremonial magic and turning it into a newer form of ritualistic magic. And I love how you even explained that in some of your books, where ceremonial magic was great for the time, and it was great for the purists. But we've kind of gone past that, and there's ways of doing just as powerful of magic in a newer way, in a newer edge of processes that doesn't have to be so traditionalist. And we've talked about that on my show before with other guests, that I have no problem with the Frater Ashen Kashans out there who follow the Lemegeton note for note, and they literally do everything to a T. That's great, and it is powerful. It's a powerful form of magic. But do you still want to be practicing, magic from hundreds of years ago the exact same way, or do you want to do what you have, Frater, and really make it your own and never take away from its power? If anything, make it more unique and more custom to yourself.
I've got 2 rules if I mentor somebody into magic. Number 1, you need to build for yourself a foundation of magical rituals and practices. So that's really important, pulling that together. And also that your practice is something that is based not only on, objectives that you want to achieve, but also the cycle of the seasons and the moon. All of these things are a part of the sacred perspective of magical being. And I believe that everybody needs to kind of be aware of that. The other thing is that you can receive rituals from me or from other books, other sources, but you have to take that material and you have to digest it and you have to come up with your own system in order to make it yours. And the one problem that I've got with the ceremonial purists or the grimoire purists, as I like to refer them to, and I don't detract from what they're doing. What they're doing is really an incredible thing. I have lots of respect for them. They don't have a real lot of respect for me, and I've actually had some pretty harsh interactions with some of them. But, in order for someone to truly work magic from the late Renaissance, you need to adopt a mind state that is similar to that. And in other words, if you were practicing in the 16th century, you have the Catholic calendar of the various feasts and celebrations and periods of fasting, and so you have an entire calendar of what I would call religious symbolic practices and exercises, and that is automatically adopted as part of your regimen of what it is that you do because everybody did it then. And the second thing is that the way to go within was pretty much based on the monastic system of meditation and prayer, as well as self-sacrifice, of atonement and achieving a level of purity so that you could interact with spirits and abrogate the authority of Yahweh or God. And I just feel that we don't have that anymore. Plus, guys and people in those times had a lot more time on their hands. You could have, if you were well-to-do, you could have various agents continue your business for you while you retired for a few months and focused on your spiritual studies. If you were a peasant, you didn't have that time, but you had itinerant sorcerers who went from town to town like a tinker or a healer. And these people basically collected stuff. Some of them were literate, some of them weren't. These were the cunning men and women who went around, and but they lived from it, and oftentimes their families helped support them. So I mean, we're just so far away from that whole mindset, that whole lifestyle. I mean, and what we do know of it is just fragmentary. So I really feel that reconstructing that time is going to fail, and you're going to have to fill it in with your own imagination, which is kind of what I'm doing. I'm using my imagination to build and create something that is based on something that is ancient, that has a provenance, but also that is extremely modern and accessible and relatable to average people.
And I think you have to do that because, I mean, just like you said, the collective unconscious as a whole has went through pivotal shifts over time from being a very, tight-knit cultural stay together, your own town, your own area, being the group mentality. And over time, we have become, as the vibration rises overall, which is what we want, people started to segregate from that a little bit and become more independent on their own, which kind of dropped that group mentality. But also because we're so independent and on our own these days and things have shifted, we're always so fascinated and distracted and taken up by so many different things. So it really changed humanity as a whole, and you can't really necessarily go off of the tomes and the grimoires of ancient times because, as you said, it is a very different time now than when these were written hundreds of years ago. So it has to be something that still keeps that root essence, which you've done, but brings a new flavor to it. And as you said, you've taken pieces of different workings. I certainly see Golden Dawn influence in your workings, even Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO. I do see some of that in your workings, but it's certainly not either of those two structures by any means. It is very much your own, and I love the fact that you said earlier about the circle. Now, we talked to Delamin Ra from Africa earlier this season about the importance of ritual circles, and I wanted to break the stigma that a lot of modern practitioners don't understand, especially on the left-hand path side, where it went from being something that was a necessity, that something that could really catapult your workings, to being this thing that, I don't work with circles when I'm summoning spirits because I'm friends with them, I'm connected with them, this or that, these crazy things that people say. And they only ever went off of the perspective that it was for protection, and I'm so close to Azazel, when I call him, I don't need protection. Well, That's great, but that's not even the purpose of the circle. That's one purpose that people have used it for, but as you said, it is to be your sacred space. It is to be your vehicle for the working in all aspects, from meditation to trance work to everything in between, the ritual itself, the invocation of the evocation. It is the vehicle that you use in ritual, and so many people don't understand that. They've cut it out of their rituals, and a lot of these same individuals will talk about how they have a good experience, but they don't have a deep of experience as they wanted to. Well, because you're cutting out one of the bedrocks of the ritual and then wondering why you're not having more of a fluid exchange when you're calling upon a spirit, you need that vehicle. You need that sphere of sensation. You need that sacred space. And I love the fact that your work is very centered on the fact of having a circle, and also the pyramids of power and the vortexes and the things that you've added that to me are really profound, because something I see from you that's very different is I'm a big guy on quantum physics, and how I see your work really bringing quantum physics into it. And when you create the doorway, you're bringing those states of mind, but also bringing in energy shifting and changing and opening gates that you do step through in ritual, and it does change the game. When you step through that and your mind can accept that, hey, I just stepped through the door into a new world and I am on equal footing with the deity that I'm calling, it is a game changer, and no one that I've ever read has done that.
Well, the thing is that witches had what they called the circle dance, and it was a dance that where men and women would hold hands. It'd be alternate gender, and in the center would be the high priestess, and everyone would dance around the circle, chanting and chanting and chanting, and going faster and faster, and then the high priestess would shout out Haraya, and everyone would drop down. It's like Ring Around the Rosie. It's a child's game. Except that the energy that was produced, and of course the high priestess has got her sword high up above her head and all that, and the energy would circle around Deosil and come into a cone-like shape at a point where her just above her sword. And so we had that stage of generating that energy, and then we would imprint it with our desires, what we wanted to make happen and all that. And then we would do another circle dance, except this time, instead of focusing it at a point, in the zenith of the circle, we would project it out. And so that became what we kind of knew as it was usually referred to as a yod, or a flame, or a bolt. And in fact, that's where the term like, well, if you don't watch out, I'm going to zap you, it had a lot of goofy nomenclature that went with it, concepts with it. But the structure of that is the male orgasm, if you think about it. And the energy is very, very masculine. It's phallic.
Yes.
So I was musing about that and said, well, there should be something the opposite of that. What would be the feminine magic? Well, it would be, in many ways, the opposite of all of the attributes of a cone of power. And so what would it be? It would be going Widdershins, or counterclockwise. And instead of this, dancing around the periphery, and so these, men and women are dancing around the periphery, but, there's the sexual arousal, but there's not the satisfaction of contact. So there's that polarity that's instilled and kept. Well, if that polarity, if instead you draw a crossroads where you join the north and the south and the east and the west into the center of the circle, and you have a Widdershin spiral and you project the energy down, you've created a vortex. And the vortex, unlike the cone of power, cannot be banished. It is a container so that you can actually work with a vortex and have multiple layers of rituals that you can house into it, because you can seal the vortex, and then next time you come to work ritual, you can unseal it and then continue working with that energy structure. And over a period of time, you can fill it with all kinds of energy structures. And then at some precipitous time, you can then have it achieve climax. And this waves of energy would be coming out from the center, going to the periphery and out into the world around you, like a woman's orgasm.
Absolutely. And it's very, so an experience that I had when using the two in combination with one another, and I don't know how to explain this exactly, when using the cone of power and the vortex together in a ritual circle, I had the feeling of being suspended in air. I had the feeling of the floor almost disappearing underneath me in the ritual circle, and almost that I was at that crux, that middle point between the cone and the vortex, and that I was almost suspended in my ritual temple during ritual. I can't explain it. It had a very powerful effect. And I've done some other experiments, but that was profound. And it was something that, like I said, when I read it, it struck with me. And then when I tried it, it certainly had some very good, profound results, not only on that experiment, but other experiments. And that's why I said it's so incredibly unique, because you bring that together with so many other points. And you have those purists out there that will say, like, oh, it reeks of witchcraft. Well, you know what? That's fine, because these guys in organizations like the Golden Dawn and OTO and AA and so forth, they only want to do things one way, and they follow the book of their predecessors before them, and that's great. But I mean, where's your identity? Well, you know, you're only sticking with that. You're not individual. You simply are a follower of someone else who's already long gone, right. And that has its own power. But that's sad.
If you add to this structure that you're working with a pylon is nothing more than at your feet. You draw a device, like, let's say, an invoking pentagram, and then above you, you draw another device, like another invoking pentagram, and then you draw an invoking spiral, very narrow one, like a line, in between them to draw them together. Then you've created what is known as a pylon. And a pylon will consist of two kinds of energies being fused into a single one. Now, if you set that pylon to, let's say, the four watchtowers or the four angles, because I work with an 8-based magic circle, and then you connect them together, you get a square in the circle, and if you connect them to the zenith of the circle, then you will get a pyramid. And you've got the square in the circle, that represents the joining of the masculine and the feminine, and you've got the pyramid structure with the sphere around it, that is also the feminine and the masculine joined together. You've got a powerful energy system, and then if you imprint it with a sigil that you've made up with your desire, and then, you wind up the power by going diacyl into the center, and then you exteriorize it by doing just the opposite, which is slow Widdershins spiral going out until you get to the outer periphery of the circle, and then you project that power out. It's far more incredibly powerful and efficient and successful than using a cone of power.
Wow.
So, I mean, and then as it goes on, you can get even more advanced energy structures than that. I've always used a combination of energy structures and also working with spirits, because what that does is it allows you to have both the spiritual contact as well as a kind of tangible energy that is really very powerful and rewarding. It really amplifies the connection and communication link between you and the spirit or spirits that you've invoked.
I love that. No, I think that's tremendous.
And
I believe it.
The main practice, though, that keeps all of this together is the Godhead assumption, which is something that I believe is incredibly important. And in fact, I usually do a Godhead assumption before I work any magic. And the Godhead, of course, that I'm working with is my own personal Godhead. It is, as the voodoo magicians, the Bokors would say, the God of your head. I think that is the most important part of this, because if you have within you a deity that is awakened and conscious, and merged with you, and you work magic, then it isn't just you that's working the magic, it's you and the God that is working the magic. And I think that is really the way in which you can protect yourself against any sort of hostile entity that you might encounter or you might experience. Certainly, trying to take on your God within would be sort of counterproductive. And that just creates overall an entire system of magic that is very different than the kind of magic that is practiced by magicians who are more ceremonial based. Having the God ride you while you work magic, I think, is the most incredible thing that anybody can do.
And I love that. The first time I came across the Godhead assumption, first time I ever came across it in conversation, and then obviously ways of performing it, was in a Golden Dawn manual, and I'm like, I never heard about this before, and read about it. It's a very powerful step, as you said, that a lot of people don't talk about right now. It's not something that is brought up. Someone might say connect into your higher consciousness, or meet the higher spirit or the holy guardian angel and all these different things, but they're not talking about doing a Godhead assumption right during your practice on a regular basis to be at its peak and to be performing at your peak, bringing the two together merged as one for more power in the ritual, but as you said, also for protection of what you're working with. And it really is another level of taking you out of your normal egoic mind into a higher state of consciousness during your workings.
Indeed. And as far as I'm concerned, witches can talk about their familiar spirit. Ceremonial magicians can talk about their higher self, and they can talk about the headless one or the bornless one, depending upon how you perceive that entity. And all of these things are to me the same. In witchcraft, we learned that because we are polytheists and because we believe in the immanence of deity, there was absolutely nothing wrong with us to assume Godhead in a ceremonial and magical sort of context. And this became a part of our discipline. I mean, yes, the high priest and high priestess would, perform the drawing down rite, which is what they call it. And curiously enough, the drawing down rite and the Godhead assumption in the Golden Dawn are really close to each other, which kind of makes you wonder where Gerald B. Gardner got that ritual idea from. But so it was a natural thing, a natural rite in witchcraft. I just basically took it to another level and made it a required part of the magic that I work.
And I love that, because it should be. As I said, it really brings a new resonance to your work. It's going to get you more proficient results. And I am big on teaching the students that I talk with the concept of what level of connection do you want to have with spirit? Do you want to have, and I always compare it to like drinking, do you want to have the wine cooler or do you want to have the moonshine? I mean, they're both profound in their own way. You're going to have a connection with something that seems so otherworldly, though it's not. But do you just want to have this light, how do I say it? This light experience where you're like, okay, I had a contact, but it didn't blow my mind, but it was pretty cool. Or do you want to have that experience that you walk away from that just rocked your world? And that's what everyone should be going for, because what's the main reason of connecting to spirit? Not just to say you did it, to gain that gnosis, to gain that knowledge and wisdom, or for whatever end that you're going for. If you're going to ask for something, you want it to be given to you properly, and you want it to be the purest and strongest that it can be. So, when people are taking little missteps or cutting things out for ease, it's one of the things I run into quite often is people saying, well, I did it to make things easier. Well, that's okay in certain cases, but it isn't always meant to be easy. Ritual magic isn't going to be something you jump in 15 minutes, you're where you want to be. You're going to be doing grounding and centering. You're going to be doing trance work and breathing techniques. You're going to have to get your mind to that state to be able to connect to deity, and it's going to take a while. I mean, most rituals are going to take quite a chunk of time, a couple hours. I know when I do my weekly... So I do rituals every day, but my weekend ritual, Saturday nights usually, I go pretty deep. I spend 2 to 3 hours in ritual by myself every week. But you have people say, oh, well, I don't have that much time to dedicate it. Well, you don't necessarily have to, folks, but you have to understand that you get into it what you put into it. Or you get out of it what you put into it, excuse me. So it's not meant to be a weekend warrior thing. It's something you have to, and Frater, you say this all the time. And I love that you do, because I think is the most important thing in magic, and then we'll take a quick break and come back on it. Discipline, your daily discipline. I find that so many people, I do a ritual here and there, I jump in when I feel like it. It doesn't become a way of life to them. It's like almost like something they do as a hobby, and I have no respect for that. I like the fact of when it is someone's discipline. It is something that you live and breathe. It is like getting up and brushing your teeth in the morning. You have something that has been stitched into the fabric of your life. So, folks, when we come back after this break, we're going to talk a little bit about discipline. We're going to talk a little bit about the ESSG, which was Frater's organization that he formed, and then we're going to start to kind of segue into tonight's topic, which is the Nephilim giants and the Enochian forms of magic. So we'll be right back on Knights of the Nephilim after these messages.
Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Belladonna's Botanicals. Belladonna's Botanicals is owned by Jennifer Vatsa, a left-hand path and poison path witch, certified aromatherapist, herbalist, perfumer, skincare formulator, and incense crafter who designs and has created a massive product line consisting of over 300 products, with new ones being released every month. Belladonna's Botanicals provides high-quality, handcrafted metaphysical and self-care products, including flying ointments and oils, herbal tinctures and elixirs, herbal smoke blends, ritual oils, powders, incense, radionically charged crystals, ritual bath products, fragrances, and bath and body products. Jennifer draws inspiration from the spirits she works with, and they often have requests. Anecdotally adding that as she was creating her product lines for the dark goddesses and demonic gatekeepers, that King Paimon showed up requesting his own product line as well. She often directly channels what they would like to be included in their products, in addition to her own ritual workings along with known correspondences. She also has a popular left-hand path-oriented YouTube channel where she posts content on everything from podcasts with other occultists to her gnosis from working with different spirits and various topics pertaining to her craft and creations. You can check out her product line at www.belladonnasbotanicals.com. Again, that is belladonnasbotanicals.com. Or check out her videos on YouTube by searching her name, Jennifer Vatsa. That is Vatza. Thanks, Jen. Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Goetic Impressions. Goetic Impressions is a company dedicated to the faithful creation of advanced ritual tools by following grimoire guidelines as closely and as feasibly as they can in the modern world. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, or their website, goeticimpressions.com, to stay informed on new projects and limited-time items that they roll out frequently. For listeners of Knights of the Nephilim podcast, you can use the promo code KOTN10 for 10% off of your overall order. Again, that is KOTN10 for 10% off of your overall order. And make sure you check out their Facebook, Instagram, and website. Once again, the website is www.goeticimpressions.com. Again, that is goeticimpressions.com for absolutely everything for your ritual needs. Fantastic items, quality items, greatly priced, quick shipping. Can't speak highly enough about these guys. Absolutely wonderful team, and I'm glad to have partnered with them. Thanks, guys. Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Limitless Liberation. I'll read you about this wonderful company from their owner, Elena. Limitless Liberation was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial. Lucifer has been with me most of my life, as far back as I could remember. Belial and I started to work when I was going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create what he called Charger for him. He showed me the designs, so I created the first charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there I had spirits lining up with requests for magical items. Some are control freaks, while others just inspire. They are all so individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you're working with, thus aiding easier connection between the two of you. They also operate like a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger as you feed them and pull from them during ritual, as well as to strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits that we love to work and build relationships with. You can check her shop out at etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. Again, that is etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation.
All right, guys, we're back on Knights of the Nephilim radio show. We've been hanging out for the last just shy of an hour, I guess you could say, with Frater Barrabbas, a ceremonial magician, or I should say a ritual magician, author of multiple books of just profound knowledge. And one of the ones I want to give a shout out to real quick, 'cause I love all his works. But I will tell for anybody listening out there that say, you know what, I want to learn more of his work. I want to learn the structures of what he's talking about with his unique practice of magic. Or just for any neophytes out there that really want to learn a way of doing magic properly from start to finish, everything from trance work to pranayama yoga, breathing techniques to the summoning itself, go out and pick up a copy of Ritual Magic, Foundations, Grimoire, and the Greater Key, the Omnibus Edition. This book is phenomenal. In fact, it's one of my favorite books on occultism, ritual magic that there is. It's, roughly 540, 550 pages long, and it is packed with knowledge. There's no filler, there's no bullshit in this book. It is just a straight how-to guide from start to finish, properly perform magic. And one of the things that I talked about just before the break was the fact of having a daily discipline. Now, some people might not understand that. They might do the whole every other couple days I jump in the ritual circle or perform magic however I choose. But if you're not having a daily discipline, I can tell you you're missing out on something. As anything in life, being disciplined, doing it daily, and sticking with it builds up a personal power within yourself that someone who's not just can't possibly begin to understand. Whether this is just 15 minutes or it's 3 hours, whatever it might be, doing it every single day builds that dedication, builds that discipline, and produces much more profound and accurate ritual results. So, Frater, I would love for you to talk a little bit about, putting together that book. I know originally it was a couple separate books or 3 separate books that kind of got merged into one. Amazing, amazing volume there. How was writing that? And can you tell us a little bit more about your take on the perspective of discipline?
Essentially, a discipline has to be established in your practice to build what I call a foundation. Once you've built that foundation, then you can approach magic in a much more ad hoc kind of fashion. But you've got to have that foundation first. And as you pointed out, the foundation really requires an awful lot of activity. Like you, in my early years, and this lasted probably for almost a decade, I worked just about every weekend, a major working. And then when I had my own house, didn't need to have roommates in an apartment and all that kind of weird stuff, and also had an outdoor grove, I was able to, do some major workings that actually lasted, every weekend for a month. And then, 3 or 4 days in a row, actually took time off from work and basically went through these processes of these ordeals. And the way you can look at a discipline is really simple. There's daily exercises, there are weekly exercises, and there are monthly exercises, and there are seasonal exercises. And this kind of fits in with the idea of being attuned to the earth around you, which is kind of a witchcraft concept, But I think anyone who believes that they are a practitioner of magic has to pay close attention and be sensitive to their environment and the earth around them. The daily practices would be, well, you wake up in the morning and then and the sun goes through its cycles and then goes into the evening, and being aware of the sun's diurnal cycle, and you sleeping and dreaming and working, and then also being able to pay attention to the spiritual dimension and magical dimension of your life at some point, meditating at some time during the day or evening, waking up in the morning, just basically bringing a lot of care and a lot of, I would say, magical perspectives in your daily existence, making sure when you wake up in the morning that there's something magical there that you connect to. At lunchtime, there's something magical that you connect to. In the evening, when you come home and the sun sets, you're aware of that sun setting. You connect to something in your magic and all that. And then sometime during the evening, there's something that you will do, maybe some really focused meditation in your magical temple or your magical space. But then, once a week, on the weekend, you'll have a larger chunk of time, maybe 2 or 3 hours, in which you can expand to actually do some ritual practice and ritual work. And then on a monthly basis, you follow the cycle of the moon. The moon goes through its phases, and you need to be aware of that, because working magic to the cycle of the moon is critically important in any kind of magical system, particularly planetary magic, as well as energy magic. And, there should be at some point around the full moon that you will retire and be able to do some kind of magical working with the full moon. And the new moon is important too, because it represents a period of quiet or silence or internalization. And then, of course, there's the 4 seasons. And there's a midpoint in the season, and there's a beginning point in the season. So you've got your equinoxes, and you've got your solstices, and then you've got the midpoints, which are like, Beltane and Sabine, Imbolc and Lammas. So you've got these 8 seasonal nodes, and you enter into them with some kind of, expression. A gratefulness for what you've achieved in life, and a hope for what you might achieve. And you do this day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out. And you do this for, maybe 5-7 years. And you'll have established a powerful foundation that will last you the rest of your life.
I agree. I had to fall back a little bit because having kids and I bought a new home and other things going on, and last year was extremely rough for my family. We lost quite a few people over a year's time, just an unheard of number. And, I had to kind of fall back a little bit from my daily discipline, but I took that to heart when I read your work, because I was already working on a discipline. I already firmly believed and was teaching others that a discipline is essential, but it's something that I wasn't seeing a lot of people talk about. They would say stay disciplined, but not in the way that you had talked about it. And it really resonated with me. And it's something that I'm back into my discipline. And for those listening out there, it is not easy, as I mentioned earlier. This is not something that's always going to be fun. It's not something that's always going to be easy. That's the point. Because you were like a blade being put into the flame. You were tempering yourself to become a fine blade. And for myself, I get up every day at 5 a.m. and from 5 to 7, I do first a little bit of lifting, stretching, ritual, and meditation. At evening, 8 to 9 p.m., another bit of ritual and meditation. This is every single day, so you're getting about 3 hours of ritual a day. Not everybody can do this, I understand. It's about working with what you have, willing to lose sleep, changing your sleep schedule. And as Frater said, I kind of align myself with, as the sun comes up, I'm there for it, and I am doing certain processes mentally within to start my day, to uplift myself, to open myself up to clarity. And at the end of the night, as the sun is going down, I am alleviating, cleansing, grounding, and allowing myself to be into the dream world. And it's profound, and I'm actually on the process right now of starting to shift that 5 a.m. to 4 a.m. And there's a lot of people I know that are like, you're insane. No, it's just that I'm dedicated with my practice. This isn't something that's just for fun. This is a way of life. I look at myself as a soldier of occultism, and It's about finding what works for you. Not everybody has to put in 3-4 hours a day, but you should be putting in at least an hour a day, if you can, to build up these processes, as Frater said, to get to a point where maybe someday you don't have to necessarily do it as much, but unless you've been doing this for years and years, unless you're that tempered, you need to do it. It's the basics of it. So many people want to skip the basics of things, even things like meditation, trance work. I don't know how many people I meet that like don't want to take the time to learn this, but will all be all about summoning. I want to conjure a spirit. Well, you can't properly conjure a spirit unless you can properly do meditation, envision work, trance work. Talking about how you want to scribe, but you've never done any trance work. How does that work? Tell me. So if you're listening out there, there are prerequisites that have to take place, that have to happen for you to be able to do ritual properly and efficiently. So that's why I said pick up his books. Pick up the Ritual Magic book and read that baby from start to finish about 4 or 5 times. Adopt everything that Frater says in this book, and I promise you, you will take your practice that you're currently at now, whether a neophyte or whether proficient in your practice, it'll amplify it either way. There are things you will learn. I go back to it and reread it every now and again, and I still learning things. I pick up something. I didn't pick it up last time, and I never done that in my practice. So it'll continue to change you as any good work would or should. So please, if you're listening out there, do that, because it can be the difference between the wine cooler and the moonshine, folks.
The name of the book is Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic, or MARM for short.
I guess, yeah, it is at the top. I'm apologizing. Yeah, it is. It does
That's
say
okay.
Mastering the Art of... I see the Ritual Magic big on it. I had it sitting beside me. I've read it numerous times, but I always just look at the Ritual Magic Manual. And it is truly a Ritual Magic Manual. I mean, this baby's got some girth to it, and it is just packed with a lot of knowledge, and I give you kudos for that. But, folks, if you're listening out there, by any means, this is not his only work. His first book was Disciple's Guide to Ritual Magic, which talks about a lot of the same things in ritual magic in different levels, and then later on came the Magic Manual, and it kind of is that book on steroids. But there's so many other workings that Frater has put out. I know one of the books that I absolutely loved was his Magic Kabbalah for beginners. Now, when it's for beginners, it's not for necessarily a beginner that's never looked into the Kabbalah at all. It's for someone who at least has a grounding in it. But it is something that will help really launch you in Kabbalistic theory and understanding. And that is something that's always been near and dear to me, to anybody that knows me in the occult sense, that I've studied Kabbalistic workings and in structures for quite some time, and whenever I came across Frater a little while back, I was like, oh, he has a book on the Kabbalah. Let's see what he has to say. And once again, there were still things that I'd never heard before that I learned from him that I'd never learned from all these other things that I've studied. So you're always going to pick up something new. There's spirit conjuring for witches. There's elemental powers for witches. And I believe, if you want to tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll jump into tonight's topic, is you have a book coming up on talismanic magic. Is that correct?
Yes, it's called Talismanic Magic for Witches. It's where I introduce what I call the talismanic equation. And the talismanic equation is where you combine a planet with an element. So you've got the 7 planets, actually 5 planets and the sun and the moon. And then you've got the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, water. And when you combine them, you end up with a matrix of 28 different, what I call talismanic elemental spirits. And they line up with the entities in the Enochian system called the seniors. So it's the seniors and then the 4 kings of the sun. And so there's your 28 spirits. And I started working with that a long time ago. And, learned that it was really a secret, obscure way of actually generating talismans instead of, in an active sort of way, instead of the passive way of waiting for an astrological event to occur and then exposing your talisman at that particular moment in time, or even fabricating it, the final bits of it in that particular, time period when that period is active. That brings you into lunar mansions, which also more or less match up to the 28 talismanic elementals. And the mansions of the moon are really incredibly powerful. You've got to be careful when working with them because they're really good at generating powerful talismans that can effectively change a material world, because a talisman, once it's completely charged, works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly putting magical energy out there to make, whatever it is that you desire, your objective, to come true. And you can also talk to the talisman and get it to adjust to a certain extent what that objective is over time. You can also talk to the talisman and give it to somebody else so it'll have an effect on them. So all of these topics, including the temporal model of magic, are pretty well covered in this book. It's the largest book I've written. In addition to that, so that'll be book number 3 in that series. Book number 4 in that series, I've completed writing. It's called Sacramental Theurgy for Witches. And this is where you get into the magical mass and the magical benediction, and into Godhead personification, and a way of more rigorously obtaining a Godhead manifestation in yourself, so that it's tangible to you and tangible to other people, and plus the ability to generate sacraments of many different types, including amulets. And the 5th book, which I'm halfway through writing right now, is going to be called Transformative Initiations for Witches. And that book is going to be looking at how you can basically work with the cycle of the hero or the heroine, which is 17 stages plus 5 for the cosmic onic cycle, which is 22. And that matches up with the 22 trumps of the major arcana. And I believe I covered that in the book, Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic. But I'm going to, extend it and make it, I would say, a more detailed sort of book. And that'll be the 5th book and the last book in that series.
Wow. No, that's incredible. I didn't even know about those ones. I was staying with you on pretty much all new releases over the last few years, and then social media decided to axe me and cut me off, and I'm not allowed onto Facebook or anything anymore. Long story that you wouldn't have been there for to hear, but for some reason I got completely shut down, not allowed on these websites anymore. So I haven't been able to keep with some of the things. So it's great to hear that not only did I know that there was the talismanic book, but I didn't know about the others. And once again, folks, you can hear that Frater's going to a level beyond what you're normally hearing with talismanic magic, what you're normally hearing with any of these subjects, including his book on elemental magic. I mean, I had a conversation a little while back, and it was funny. I referred them to your book. We were talking about elementals, and they said, okay, that you're working with the 4 elementals. I says, well, there's not 4, there's 16. And they says, what are you talking about? I says, well, yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Is like, but you can work with 16 different sides of elemental magic. You have the fire of water, the fire of fire. And it started going into a little bit more of the aspects. And I says, listen, don't let me explain it to you. I says, let someone much greater than me explain it. I says, you need to pick up this book, and sent this individual I was talking to your book. And then they got back to me and says, wow, this is amazing. I said, exactly. I said, there's depth here beyond what is being taught today. That I said it again earlier, and I'll say it again. I love the fact that you bring ancient understandings and powerful perspectives of magic into the forefront in a new way that modern generations can pick up, understand, and apply. Because, like I said, there's so many people worried about the old ways that aren't catering to a new crowd that can understand it. And there's a lot of people coming up with new methods of magic that are great, that completely abandon that completely abandon old forms of magic, but they have no substance to them, and there's really nothing there. They got people chasing their tails in the ritual circle, if there even is one, and they're not getting anywhere. So many people I've come across have but I've been spending the last couple of years reading these books and practicing these things, and there's just no substance to it. And these individuals have wasted their time by charlatans of the occult field, and there's so many out there. So, folks, follow someone who truly has a backing and understanding, and Frater is one of them. Now, before we go any further, I think it's time that we should jump into tonight's subject. We wanted to talk about the Nephilim, or the Nephilim giants, and your understanding of what they are and how that ties into Enochian magic. So please, the floor is yours. Jump in and tell us a little of your understanding of this amazing subject.
There are parts of the Old Testament that are just plain strange. There's a number of them, and the more you know about the Old Testament, the more unusual some parts of it are. But probably the most unusual is in Genesis chapter 6, when they talk about the sons of God saw the daughters of man and desired them. And so they went against the expected rules, and they basically descended from heaven and chose one each to each of them, and there were 200 of these angels, and they cohabitated with these women. And the word Nephal, or Nephilim, comes from the Aramaic Nephal, and Nephal means giant, but it can also mean fallen. And in fact, the lost verb form of Nephal means fallen one. And the Kabbalists pretty much saw that as being the case too. That the Nephilim are actually the fallen angels. They're the B'nai and Elohim, the sons of God, who saw the daughters of men and desired them and came down to earth. And their children are also known as the Nephilim. In the Bible, they refer to them as the Hanshei Hashem, the men of names, or the men of renown. And they were also known as the great ones. And if someone is great, then they could probably also be a giant, larger than life. These are all metaphors that I think hide and obscure the concept of what it is that we're dealing with here. And of course, because the Nephilim chose women, they had children, and they also taught these women all of the arts that they knew. And so, oddly enough, the names of the Nephilim, which we have from the book of Enoch, of all places, and also the book of Jonah, actually gives a list of these angels and their names. And the two chiefs of them are known as Shemchaza and Azazel. And sometimes Azazel is also called Azazel. And so Shemichaza means my name is seen, and Azazel means maker, means God has made. And if you look at some of the other names that they have, the earth is power, burning heat of God, star of God, God of metal casters, thunder God, judge of God, lightning flash of God, God has made, of Mount Hermon, the rain of God, the cloud of God, the secret of God. So these are all like forces of nature in many ways, and in particular forces of manufacturing metal things. And the arts and crafts which the B'nai Elohim taught humanity was the arts of civilization. And because of this, and because they had abased themselves by marrying and joining with one woman each, they were condemned. And Enoch, they chose Enoch to be their intercessor with Yahweh, and unfortunately that failed. And then ultimately over time, because of all of the evil things that the Nephilim had taught humankind, what they did was, what Yahweh did was send out the 4 archangels to basically gather them together and imprison them in a nether reality. And kept them locked under seals, magical seals, and all of their knowledge. And so there was maybe some minor reverberations that came out. And I believe that when I was studying John Dee's notes and the scrying sessions that he had with Edward Kelly, I saw that there were some peculiar things going on. And one of the things was breaking or opening the 4 seals of the 4 archangels. That's specifically talked about, that Dee did at the very beginning of his workings before all this incredible information came out, and including entire system of magic. And so what I did is I did some massive, intense invocations of those 4 archangels and got them to reveal to me what those seals were, made them up in artistry, and then opened those seals. And when I did, then I was able to invoke and evoke and discuss and commune with the chiefs of the Nephilim. And when I did that, it's all of this magical material just came out by the ton, including an entirely Enochian system of magic, of Kabbalah. I mean, it was just really amazing, all the stuff. I got so much material from these workings that I still have not taken that material and pulled it together. What I'm planning on doing sometime in the future is to create a Liber Nephilim, or a book of the Nephilim, in which I will outline these spirits and order and structure them, and then put together rituals and all that will and invocations that will allow people to connect with them, including, opening the 4 seals, as what I did many, many years ago back in the early 90s. And it's part of the lore of the ESSG for people to basically go and open up these seals, and then to converse and commune with the 4 major chiefs, which is Shemichaz, Azil, Ramatiel, and Turiel.
Wow. No, that's absolutely fascinating, because I've always loved the lore, not only in the biblical side of things, but obviously the books that were removed, as you mentioned, the Book of Enoch, and the stories telling of it, and what really was meant there, and the fall, always has fascinated me. Now, as I said to you earlier, I never worked a chunk of the Enochian system, but that is fascinating to hear that you're incorporating the Nephilim into it, and that it's kind of pivotal in all the material that they poured upon you. I absolutely would love to see you release a Liber Nephilim book and explain how to do that, because that's something I could definitely jump on and see myself practicing. Just because it's always been something that I've been fascinated by, and to know that they've kind of blessed you with that much knowledge, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, Azazel or Azael is an incredibly important entity, and he is the only demonic, actually demigod entity who has appeared in just about every Goetic grimoire that has ever existed. He has a lot of different names. He's symbolized as the goat, the sacrificial goat, and the spirit that the sacrificial goat is given to ward off the evil eye and bad luck for the tribe.
Yeah, they still practice that to this day in some Judaism circles on Yom Kippur, giving one of the goats to Azazel or Azazel. And it's fascinating, the lore behind that. And that would make sense, because in every grimoire there is always at least one character signified by the goat, such as, and I can't remember if it was the Grand Grimoire or Grimoire Virum, they have Leonard, which is symbolized as the goat. You can look at Lucifer's Raphalokel, sometimes is signified as a goat, and many others. So it is interesting that there are multiple names, and the Bible had named Azazel several times as being kind of the epitome of Satan, the adversary, for being such a powerful being and teaching mankind what it was not meant to learn. So, fascinating story.
There's a book written by Jake Stratton Kent, who I must say had a horrific stroke, and that it's very likely that he may not recover.
Oh, was this recently?
Yeah, well, this was late. It was last year that it happened.
Oh, wow. Thoughts go out to him and his family. Phenomenal writer and practitioner.
I can recommend to you a really small pamphlet, and it's by Hadean Press, and it's called A Prince Among Spirits. And basically, this is an entire pamphlet about the spirit associated with Azazel.
I'm writing it down right now, actually. Prince Amongst Spirits, Azazel, Jake Stratton Kent. Perfect.
Yeah. And basically, in the Goetia, he's also known as Furkos.
Yes.
And Foros.
And that's interesting because I always thought that those two spirits were the same. I never linked them with Azazel, but I always thought that the two of them were the same exact being.
And then in the Grimorum Verum, we're talking about Surgat.
Okay. So was it and maybe you don't know off the top of your head, maybe you do. Was it the Grimorum Verum or Grand Grimoire that had Leonard, who was I guess like the keeper of the gate, if I remember it correctly.
You are referring to the Grimorum Verum.
I thought so. I couldn't remember. It's been a while since I read it. I never practiced its methods. I when it came to the very old school ceremonial magic, the only forms that I ever really truly practiced was the Goetia, and I even made some alterations to it. But I always read all the old grimoires because I loved them, and still even to this day will jump through anything I can get, and just because it's been a fascination. But I always, as you, kind of made things my own because I didn't see myself practicing, such as like the Grand Grimoire. I didn't see myself using the skin of the kid, and forming this giant circle and and performing it and getting the blood of a bat and all these wild things. I'm like, I kind of make my own forms of ritual magic that seem to be pretty potent.
When it comes down to sacraments, I prefer surrogates myself, which is wine and bread.
That's interesting. I do wine and bread a lot. In fact, I just did a very big Hecate/Helios ritual for the new year and had several loaves of homemade bread, several bottles of wine, and then sweet cakes.
Yes, what I'm going to do probably in the next several months is I'm going to go into meditative trance and commune with each of the 20 chiefs of the Nephilim and have them give me their character or seal.
Wow, that is profound.
And then that's what's going to go into the grimoire that I'm going to produce. It'll be my very first grimoire, really, that will basically allow people to contact these spirits, because these spirits are really powerful, but they are very attuned to humanity. In fact, they're very humanitarian type spirits. Sometimes, the goetic spirits can be hostile, they can be angry, and that's because that you conjure them because the energy of anger is sometimes what you need. You need that hostility, that anger, that agitation in order to make something happen, in order to break something that it has ensorcelled you or captured you, or basically finding a way of getting retribution. So having spirits that are angry or hot in the Goetia or in the Grimorum Verum is extremely important and useful. And so the spectrum of angels and demons that you're going to be dealing with have a lot of different sort of energy signatures and personalities associated with them. But I found that the most badass spirits that I have ever invoked anywhere were the seraphim and cherubim. It was like invoking giants who looked down upon you as being, like an ant.
I can imagine.
And who judged you right then and there, brought up and showed you all of your your failings, all of your sins. But there was also a sense of the ability to find compassion and forgiveness. So they had both of the terrifying retribution, wrath of God sort of aspect to them on one hand, and on the other hand, the compassion of God. You know, the love, the hope, the willingness to help people. You know, to make themselves better, to make amends for the evil that they have done.
When I've said it time and time again, and even though I don't have a great experience working angelic magic, the experiences that I have had when I have worked it have been profound. There's a very different feeling when encountering an angelic being than there is a demonic being, and I can tell you that yes, it does, and I actually agree with what you said. It makes you feel small. I've actually felt just an absolute awe of the beings that I've come into contact with, to the point of almost evaporation, where I felt like I just vanished and I was just in complete dissolution of this spirit. Like, and there's no really way to put it to words, which is a very, very different feeling than when I work with hot spirits, as you mentioned, with the Goetia or some of the other chthonic beings. It's not at all the same type of resonance that comes off of it. I always wanted to jump more into it, but it's like I've always been kind of staying with this side of my practice. I don't know where you find the time I know you've been doing this a long time, but where you found the time over the years to be able to not only practice these different forms of magic, but to do it so elaborately and then work them into your own systems. And that's one of the things that I truly respect about you, because your work is phenomenal, like I said. And to hear that you're not only coming out these books I didn't realize coming up, but also the Grimoire of the Nephilim, is amazing, and I can't wait to see them come out. I certainly will purchase them. I have every other book that you've come out with. Those will go onto my shelf as well and be read quite a bit. But we did have a comment coming, and I wanted to give a quick shout-out to Natasha Sarver, who is our creational director of the radio shows that we put here together at Celestial Oddities. That's Knights of the Nephilim, that is Paranormal Guys Podcast, and Uncovering the Underground. She's a fellow occultist. She runs a witchcraft shop and metaphysical shop in Butler, Pennsylvania. She's the one who contacts all of our guests out there, folks. So if you're ever trying to reach out to anybody about the show, if you go to Celestial Oddities Radio on Facebook or Instagram and message the company, she'll be the one getting back to you. She does line up all of our guests for us. And she wanted me to tell you, Frater, that your book on witchcraft absolutely changed her life. I had her recently read it as you were coming up on the show. I says, you really need to read some of his work. She already knew about you from me talking about you over time, but I says, you need to go ahead and read some of what he does. And she recently has, and she messaged me a little bit ago while we were on the air here, and she says, let him know that his book has changed my practice and my life.
Which book was it that she read?
It was the I know which one she's talking about. I just want to make sure I get the name right, because I'm horrible with names. It's okay. I had it and I got rid of it. The Conjuring for Witches.
Spirit Conjuring for Witches.
Correct, yes. Which is actually ironic. So I bought several of your books a little while back. It was the first book I started reading, and then I don't want to say I abandoned it, but I did abandon it, and I went back and started from the beginning with Disciples Guide, and then moved up the whole way up to present day, and then I went back and reread some of them. But I kind of went out of order. I'm like, you know what? No, I want to go back from the first thing he's written to now.
Yeah, it's the problem with modern witchcraft is that there's 3 holes in the witchcraft lore, and those holes have been filled with hoodoo, herbalism, and craft work, and for some people that has been quite sufficient, and I respect that. But for others, the pieces that are missing is spirit conjuring while establishing for yourself a personal godhead associated as your spirit familiar, and then the elemental powers for witches, which is advanced energy working. That's beyond the cone of power, as we talked about. And then the third book is Talismanic Magic for Witches, and that really brings out the piece on planetary magic. The thing is that spirit conjuring doesn't exist in the Book of Shadows, nor does advanced energy work, nor does Tal's planetary magic. We had a book in the Alexander tradition called the Book of Planets that kind of tried to, develop a planetary system of magic, but it never really quite worked out. And so, these three books are really going to be quite important. But I don't. Have you ever seen the series that's called Robin of Sherwood? It's a British cable production where they've got Robin is the hooded man, and he is the agent of Hearn, the horn god.
Oh, I don't think I have. No.
Oh, well, they're pretty easy to find, and the main character, the main character is Robin of Sherwood, but the guy who plays Hearn, the horn god, he is a person who is retreated to the forest, and he is Hearn, or he is no one. So he has like a cave area that he lives in. He's got all these herbs and all this other stuff, and does all this magic. But he assumes the personification of Hearn, the horn god. And when I saw that, with this man standing with a deer head, with fog, coming around him, and basically talking about the powers of light and darkness and all that, man, it just really thrilled me. And but there are people now in the witchcraft and pagan community who spend a large portion of their life doing nothing more than personifying a deity. One of my friends named Stephen Posh is that way, and he lives in Minneapolis, and he has a wooden, beautiful handmade wooden mask of Hearn, the horn god, and basically he does complete body makeup, and when he changes into Hearn, there is no Steve Posh anymore at all. He's gone, and there is just the horn god. And so, for people who gather together at an outdoor pagan festival, they have a god there at that festival. And in fact, it's called the Grand Sabbath, and you could also have a woman there who would personify the goddess, like Hecate, for instance. And so the people who are there have the ability to commune with two living gods. And that's part of what I talk about in Sacramental Theurgy for Witches. It's one of the parts of it, and I explain how you go about doing that. And it's almost as intensive as the Abramelin ordeal.
What I love, because in one of your books, and it might have been Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic. I can't remember which one specifically, but I think it could have been. You had talked about taking on the full attributes of the deity, and as you do certain masses or rituals and your blessing sacraments, you are blessing them as that specific deity. You are no longer there, and it really resonated with me because, as you just said, you can have a deity in human form in front of you, a very rare thing. And I thought about the power, as you said, having the feminine and masculine principles there in person, fully encompassed into human beings, how powerful that'd be. And then I even thought about it a step further. If one were to do it in a coven or a group-like setting where it would be a mutual understanding, where someone would take on the full form of a god and a female would take on the full form of a female, or a goddess, and participate in sex magic, of how powerful that could possibly be to have those two encompassing factors together in an art that most people don't even understand in modern day, how powerful sex magic can be. Bringing that together is something that I kind of took away from your book at one point in time. Not that you wrote that, but something that I had read, and I'm like, wow, can you imagine the power behind a process like that?
Well, that is the process in which the children of the Nephilim came to be, because the ceremonial, the celebratory or magical clan of the Nephilim would be where you would have a nameless priest who who would assume the identity of one of the 20 chiefs, and he would basically do sex magic with a priestess who is well trained in assuming the goddess aspect. By the way, there are 20 names of Lilith that match with these 20 chiefs of the Nephilim.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't know that either. Okay.
That'll be in my grimoire as well. But the progeny produced from such a conjunction would basically be a magical child. And so you'd have a tribe that would be full of magical children who are born of demigods and priestesses.
Very interesting. So I wasn't far off necessarily in thought when I read that, and it just kind of resonated with me for some reason. I knew there had to be more to it than just a random thought. So no, that's very interesting.
The Nephilim, unlike other goetic demons, love humankind. They spent centuries with their people. They love people. They gave them the gifts of all of their celestial knowledge that they had. And for it, their people were persecuted. Many of them were killed and driven out of the lands in which they had lived. And the spirits of the Nephilim were gathered together and imprisoned in a in-between world. I've actually been to that in-between world, and it's really strange because it's a place that is featureless, and it's like being in a kind of almost featureless, wavy sort of nebula with all these stars shining, and those stars are the spirits of the Nephilim.
Very interesting. No, I love that. Question for you, because I was recently going to put out a video and I just haven't done it yet. I have all the research together. I just haven't had the time. I know there's been so much talk, and I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the Euphrates River's drying up, and the Revelations have talked about it. The Qumran had talked about if and when the Euphrates River dries up. There's been so much talk, and I've actually compiled way more than what, if anybody's listening out there. There's a lot of videos saying the same thing. They read the same passage from Revelation. Oh, the river's drying up. The 4 angels will be released, and they're going to kill a third of the humanity. But it's everybody repeating each other. No one's saying anything different. I actually have research that connects about 60 more points of much deeper thought than that coming together. But do you have any thoughts of that? Because they're talking about, and I had kind of connected, not to give too much of my thing away, but connected the fact that they're saying that when the river dries up, there would be caves exposed, and within the caves would be the imprisoned 4 angels who would be let loose to destroy a third of the humanity. And I had equated or have a thought of how the 4 angels connect to the Grigori angel watchers, Azazel, and I connected it to Shamyaza and some of the others, because in the books it says that they were cast down to be chained in pure darkness, not to be released until the end of days. Well, then the Revelations say when the Euphrates River dries, the horn will sound and the 4 angels of the apocalypse will come out, which would be connected to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And then it goes even further. I actually started pulling out old Judaic texts that no one has even come close to bringing up in any of these videos, where it talks more in depth about what would happen with the reuniting of the 12 tribes, which I'll be bringing out in this video. But do you have any thoughts on that? Have you seen anything on that yet?
It's mythic poetry. In the systems of monotheism that have branched out from Judaism, there is a concept that God has created the world, and in the end, God will destroy the world. And in addition to that, the flood at one time, supposedly God destroyed, most of the world except for those who He chose to save. And as a witch and a pagan, I kind of don't really buy into that. I see endless cycles, and that goes back to how the Greek pagans saw things, as well as the as well as a lot of the other pagans. Hinduism has the similar sort of concept of endless cycles. The cosmogonic cycle consists of 4 stages. And at the end of the last stage is the beginning of the first stage of the next cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as actual real history, I think that we need to make some massive changes in the way in which we live. And there's some really wonderful books out there. I think there's one that's called, I forget the name of it. I think it's something like The History of the World or something like that. But basically, it talks about the fact that there's that the system that we live in right now, the cultural system that we live in, with capitalism, with oligarchs, and then a lot of other people who don't have shit. That whole system is relatively new, and human beings lived in a much different way. And they had a lot of variations in what they were attempting to do, but that we are extremely poor and resource-less compared to what our ancient ancestors were, who lived, in the Paleolithic and Neolithic times. I mean, they were not living in times that were brutal. They had pretty much figured out how to basically find all the food that they need in a matter of a couple of days of gathering, and then hunting would sort of add to it. Europeans who came to this country and who may have been captured or found themselves living with Native Americans, and then were forced to come back to live with Europeans. The first opportunity they got, they split and went back to live with the Native Americans because it was a more equitable and more fulfilling life. And I think that what we need to do is we need to change the whole equation. We're gonna have to do it because we're going to be really destroying the environment and experiencing really terrible inequality within the economies. And ultimately, humanity is either going to have to decide, either we create a system in which money is not that important and that resources are distributed in a fair and equal manner, or, we're going to descend into a new form of barbarism and civilization will fall for a period of time. And so I think that that's generally what we are facing right now. And if we want to lose what we've gained, then we just have to be mindless and continue doing what we've been doing for the untold last 4 or 5 centuries, and it will basically end, maybe not for you and I, but definitely for our children or children's children. At some point, the cataclysm will strike, and the world will end, not with a shout, but more like with a whimper. And we need to avoid that tragedy, and we need to start making changes now. And we definitely need to. We need a hell of a lot more socialism.
I agree. I mean, I think that as you said, if things don't change, it's going to lead to the race being pretty much pulverized and wiped clean, and then it will eventually come back. But it does go in those cycles where there have been cycles of great civilization before that have now gone, that are only known in relics and in distant stories, and that could very well be us if we don't come together and don't figure out a way to change how we are right now. We're in a very strange time frame in history, not only in general, but especially even within the last few years. And I know a lot of people said it, and I'm not getting all conspiracy theory here, but the starting of the last, 10 years, there's been a huge change happening. And then in the last few years with COVID happening, aside from COVID, it felt like there was some type of change in consciousness to the world, both good and bad. It felt like there was some things pulling us down, but there was also seems to have been a much bigger awakening of a lot of people starting to look outside of traditional norms of dogmatic religions and other things like that, where people are starting to look inside themselves, and hopefully by looking within themselves can find that higher piece of their consciousness, can find that connectivity and oneness with all being, that we are all one being. And by doing that, as you said, can distribute resources rather than worrying about money, and can come together as one people, and hopefully lead us to a new age.
The Star Trek paradigm,
absolutely,
where people spend time to better themselves, and money is no longer something that people concern themselves about, unless you're a Ferengi.
I know. I wish to see that. Hopefully, and like you said, it probably won't be in this generation. Either the fall or the rise will be after us. But I hope that it goes in a good direction. Just because that's the way it should be. Money is meaningless. It's not what the thing life is about at the end of the day. Now, I know we went a little bit past, but I do have two other questions for you, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Season finale, I want to make sure we finish it out good, and this has been a hell of an episode. This is going to be a tough one. I want to ask you, if you had to pick out 5 other authors' works, and I know that there's a huge list out there. It'd be hard for me to even do this. Who would you suggest to listeners out there that you really back their work? I know we talked about Jake Stratton Kent earlier. That could be one of them.
That is one of them.
That is one of them. Okay.
Taylor Elwood is another one.
Oh, yeah, I do know Taylor. Okay, I never read any of his works, but I have came across him before, actually.
I would recommend that you have him in your next series.
I'm writing him down right now so I don't forget, but I have come across his work. In fact, I think at one point in time he interviewed you on his show, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Okay, yeah. So I thought so.
Taylor Elwood helped me get started as a writer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He gave me the first option. He was the one who published Disciple's Guide.
Oh, awesome. See, I didn't know that.
Yes. Scott Stenwick is another author. He's a very close friend of mine.
Writing that down as well. I'm always looking for new people to check out. All right.
Lon Malo Duquette, of course.
Absolutely. Genius.
Funny
guy.
Extremely funny guy, but all of his funniness is sort of, very wisdom. So what do we got now? 4?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
God, there's so many.
So many.
Yeah, gosh.
It doesn't have to necessarily be your 5 favorite, just 5 that you really think really should be read by people. I love, and you mentioned Lon. Anybody who hasn't read Chicken Kabbalah, phenomenal work, because that's another way of learning the Kabbalah in a very funny way, but also very serious, and as Frater said, filled with knowledge, but also in a comedic sense.
J.R. Mascaro.
Okay.
Have you heard of him?
I have, yes.
I basically shepherded his first book out, but I really didn't have to, because the book really spoke for itself. He has a completely new and unique way of working magic.
I'll have to check that out as well. I'm always looking for, like yourself, I'm always looking for someone who just completely steps outside the box, keeps the grid of what's needed, and just says, I'm tossing the rest because it's not needed. That was the thing that, like I said, made you one of my favorite occult authors of all time instantly.
Yeah, he's got a book called Seal, Sigil, and Call. It's his first book, and I recommend it. But, there's also Aleister Crowley, there's Isra Garde, there's all of those older authors, William Gray.
See, I stick to a lot of the old stuff.
All of those older authors all had something that they gave to me. Paul Hewson's Mastering Witchcraft has a section in it for invoking the goetic spirit Vasago that works. It's there's just an awful lot of material. But when I was a young witchling, there were very few books, and they were expensive. Crowley's books, I think Magic Without Tears was one that I got a hold of that, was affordable. A lot of the other books ended up having to be republished because they were basically antique copies that were worth a huge amount of money that no one wanted to part with.
They were very expensive, and you couldn't get a hold of a lot of stuff. So I read kind of a mix of new and old, but I always find myself going back to a lot of the older writers. And you mentioned Crowley and Regardy, and I think of Mathers, and I think of two of my absolute favorites of all time would be Manly P. Hall and also Eliphas Levi. Just for some reason, Eliphas Levi's works always just really blew my mind. And who else do we got that I can think of off the top?
Pappas.
Yes.
You've got Jean-Claude Pappas. You've got Westcott.
Yes, Wayne Westcott. Yeah, absolutely.
We are standing on the shoulders of giants because the Golden Dawn took magic from the 19th century, and they brought it into the 19th century from the Renaissance. And then the Aleister Crowley and other people like him brought magic from the 19th century into the 20th.
They did, and I mean it was pivotal. I mean, I know that my early days of studying ritual magic really wouldn't be the same without figures like that, or even other ones like Albert Pike and some of his theories and things that he put together. Rudolf Steiner and his Rosicrucian style.
Or
teachings.
Barden.
Yes, Franz Barden.
Franz Barden.
Yep. Yeah, so great readers or authors out there, folks. If you're listening and you're not privy to a lot of the older style writings, I say that's where the bedrock of a lot of my practice is. So please feel free to go back and look at some of these names that we mentioned tonight. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, Frater, was the ESSG. Now, I know I had read your guys' bylaws and everything. I was fascinated with it. And absolutely, I dug in deep. This was a little while back. This wasn't for the show. And I was just fascinated with how you run your organization and how you guys take turns in leadership of the organization. As you said earlier, that there isn't this supreme ruler and that everybody kind of shares in the control of it. Everyone double checks and cross checks each other's experiences so that no one can have the delusions of grandeur and everyone can kind of be on the same page as one another. To finish out this evening, can you give any advice for anybody out there wanting to form a group, a coven, anything like that? And is the ESSG still currently a thing, or is it?
Oh yeah,
I thought it was. Okay.
There's an active temple somewhere outside of Paris, France.
Oh wow. Okay.
That I no longer have any contact with, but and it's mostly populated with individuals who have moved from Western Africa to France.
That's fascinating.
And they just went nuts over the system of magic I had. So what they did is, there's two paths. One is if you've got 5 people, yourself and 4 other people who want to form a temple of the ESSG, or the Gnostic Star is what I like calling it. What you can do is just get in contact with me and say, I've got these 5 people and all that, then I want a biography of them, a little bit of knowledge about them. And then what I'll do is I will send you the lore for the first 3 degrees of the ESSG. That's elemental, planetary magic, and theurgy. And basically send that whole chunk on a thumb drive in the mail. And then I can go from there. Now, if you only have yourself, then what I recommend that you do is to take the book, Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic, and build your own magical system, and use your magical diary, and have a couple of lunar mystery rites in which you work magic, and then a couple of solar mysteries, and then a self-initiation, and then put the dates down, put your diary down, all that, send that to me, and then I'll send you a charter and the rituals for the first 3 degrees.
That's fascinating. It's something I'd actually contemplated on before. I'm like, I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to have a chapter of the Gnostic Star in Pennsylvania? It's just hard to keep good people, as I'm sure you know, to gather in one thought.
I'm down here in Richmond, and Pennsylvania is not that far away.
It is not. So that is something I might have to continue to contemplate, because I love what you do, like I said, and I have dove quite deep into mastering the art of ritual magic and have been practicing it. So something we might have to talk a little bit further on. And then, you know what, I did say that was my last question, but I do have one more, and then we will wrap it up, because I think this is an important thing that I would like you to touch base on.
Sure.
Lore. When it comes to lore, and you might agree or disagree with me, but what I teach a lot of the students that I have talked to over time is that your own personal lore will very much contribute to the type of experience that you will have, not necessarily just in magic in general, but in the art of conjuration. And what I mean by that is, if you study completely different attributes of a deity or spirit than someone right next to you, you both perform the same type of operation, both have the same skill set, but studied and have a completely different understanding of the being that you're summoning, though it's the same being. You both will have not only similarities between the summonings, as it's the same being, but you will have absolutely different interactions with that being, even visualizations in scrying or in envision internally than one another, because it is one-to-one counterpart. It is a part internally of the subconscious of your mind being projected outwards, but it is also an ancient current that does exist externally outside of you, and you're bringing them together. That's my understanding I'm speaking of, folks. And by having your specific lore, it's almost the wrapping paper that you're putting on it. That's why somebody can summon a certain being and see them as a beautiful angel, and another person summon that same being and seeing them as a horrific monster. It's not necessarily that they appear to you in a different form, which they can. It has to do with your understandings, your fears, your desires, all of these things accumulating together in your subconscious that comes out in a projection once you actually connect with that. What are your thoughts on that type of description?
Well, you're absolutely correct about that. But more than that, your practice and your beliefs and all that is more than a wrapping paper. It's a foundation. And here's where I really have a problem with Reconstructionists working with grimoires. And that is, I don't think I've met anybody who has evoked one of the goetic demons that its appearance was modeled by the way in which they are depicted in Renaissance and later materials and books. You got these various images of what the demons look like, and everybody I've talked to, no one's experienced that. And there's a reason why, and that is those times and the expectations and the religious beliefs and everything else that was going on don't exist anymore. We have a completely different perspective. And in many ways, we're a lot less racist. We're a lot less judgmental. We're a lot less strict in our forms. People who worked magic in the Renaissance were not liberal people. They tended to be very conservative. Nowadays, people who work magic are not very conservative. They happen to be very liberal. So that's why I kind of look at, doing things exactly the way they were done in the last age is sort of it's to me it's not being very enlightened. I respect the tradition and the perspective and the work that goes into doing that. But I just don't think that those entities exist in the fashion that they were perceived in the 16th century anymore.
I agree. I've worked the Goetian spirits pretty heavily over the years, and I've never encountered any of them that fit the portrayal of what they were once said to look like. And I've even explained to people, very similar to what you just said, that it had to do with the construct of thought that the practitioners of that time were under, the way that they thought. Just as I said, their beliefs, their understandings of it contributed to how they experienced them, whereas now we don't see it from that same viewpoint. Like you said, we're not spiritually racist like that anymore. A lot of us, at least. I mean, I don't look at these demonic spirits as evil or against me in any form or way. They might have a negative attribute to it that could, disrupt life a little bit in a certain way, but I also find that there's lessons in that disruption to be learned along with what is being asked for. So when you take away that dogmatic good evil and you understand that it is just what it is, and it might have an adverse nature, but that's just its nature, you do start to see it as a completely different form of a being. And I'm glad to hear that you believe in that.
Think of it this way too, Frater. The way in which magic was perceived, the miraculous nature of it, being able to transport you to a different part of Europe or the world, to be able to, suddenly manifest for you gold. All the attributes of these entities and all of that, I've discovered that those are all archaisms that no longer apply, and that magic today actually functions in a completely different way than it did then. People then could actually see, in a fashion, witches flying through the sky and demons and that kind of stuff actually pervading their world. And of course, that definitely pushed them into going to church and praying to God and Jesus in order to deal with it. Other people didn't see anything and kind of wondered if the people who had faith were a little nuts. But magic today is more subtle. It's more psychological. It does have material effect, but the material effect is not something that, you don't have sulfurous smoke, or you don't have explosions that people next door can hear and wonder what in the hell you're doing. The manifestations are subtle. They're, in many cases, you can experience a conversation with the spirit, and if somebody else was in that circle with you and they were not so attuned, would hear and experience nothing.
Agreed.
So,
I explain that a lot to people because I go out and do paranormal investigations as well. I hate to say even investigations. I go out and connect with the spirits of the dead quite often, and I explain to people that it's about your frequency and mind state, because 4 people can be in the same room and one person see that being completely in tune and the other 3 see absolutely nothing. And it's about your frequency and mind state, the same as the ritual circle, is if you're not attuned to the same level, you're going to have a completely different experience to the person next to you. It's not that anybody's seeing things that aren't there and someone's not seeing. It's just that you're operating only in one world where someone else might be operating in 2 or 3.
Yes. And, so if time has changed how the spirits are perceived and how the magic actually works, how can anyone say that we have to do everything exactly as it's written in the old grimoire in order for us to be able to achieve any results? And there was a book where a guy came out, God, what the heck was his name? Where it had a demon on the cover of it, and basically that was what he said. You had to basically work with the old grimoires, and he was particularly keen on the Heptameron. You have to work the grimoires exactly the way that they are, without any substitutions or anything, and then you will actually get materialized results. But if you don't, that means you did something wrong, and that you have to abandon the process, and then after a 6-month period of purification, start it all over again.
Well, I know Frater Ashen Kashan that I mentioned earlier. I don't know if that was him who you're speaking of, but I know he's released a couple books, and I know he is very, very extreme on his beliefs that everything should be done 100% exactly to the grimoires, every letter to a T, every hour of the night, day of the week. There is no really substituting. If it says use a lion goiter belt, then you better damn well find a skin of lion to use. You can't substitute that with another animal or something else. I mean, it needs to be exact. And like you said, I appreciate his dedication to his craft and keeping the tradition alive. There is a place and time for that, absolutely, and someone has to do it. better him than I. But
however,
yeah,
where I draw the line is when somebody like that tells me that what I am doing is not true magic, or is delusional, or stinks of witchcraft, or is half-hearted. Because I've spent my life doing this stuff. And when people talk to me like that, it's kind of insulting.
Well, that's usually what happens is the purists will believe firmly in what they believe, but they will naysay to everyone else, whereas us doing other forms of magic actually support what they do, even though it might not be our path. It's almost like the Christian thing. You can say, I have no problem with Christians believing what they believe in, but at the same time, when you ask them, they're like, oh, they're going to burn in hell. So it kind of is that double-edged sword there, but you're going to have that. But I think that for anyone listening out there, dig deep in yourself, take what's written, even take Frater Barrabbas' work, which he even tells you to do in his books, especially Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic, to take what he's teaching you, learn it, adapt it, and then form your own structure and style of magic. That's what it's all about, because what's going to resonate more with you, someone else's work or your own? If you can perform and produce that form of magic that resonates with you and has backing to it, it will be transcendent for you. So really, that's all I had to say this evening and ask, and I do want to thank you so much, Frater, for coming on to the show. It is an honor. Like I said, I told Natasha and several of my listeners that out of all the guests I've had over 3 seasons, there was 2 this season, not to go against anybody else, but there was 2 this season that truly meant a whole lot to me, and that was Baal Cadmon and you, because both of your works have changed my workings in life, truly. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it was a pleasure being here and talking with you. I always love to talk about magic, and, maybe someday in the future we can talk again.
Absolutely. Would love to have you back on again in a future season. And if I decide to go balls to the wall enough to actually want to start either a ESSG or Gnostic Star group, or just to take on the Ritual Magic book to a form that I can reach out to you and kind of work with you a little bit more, I will let you know, because that is something that actually is on my radar. So we'll see if I can bring that to fruition.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about that or how to approach it, feel free to contact me.
Well, I appreciate that. You might just be hearing from me then. Well, anything else you want to tell the listeners out there before we close out for the evening?
I do have a blog out there. It's Frater Barrabbas blogspot.com. There's 450 articles out there. Some of them are quite lengthy. A lot of it is the material that we talked about here, and looking at various elements and attributes of the kinds of magic that I work. I recommend people go and check that out because, like I said, it's got a lot of free stuff in it, that you can get online that you don't have, that you might not get anywhere else. And you won't have to buy any books to do so. But at any rate, that's all I've got to say is, that and bright blessings to everybody who's listening. And I love your sponsors. They are all really awesome.
Thank you. They truly are. So if you're listening out there, guys, make sure you buy something from one of the sponsors out there. Support it. And if it's not for you, buy for someone that you know that certainly would love a new item for their altar or for their practice. They are great, great companies. Other than that, thank you all for listening to another season of Knights of the Nephilim. Season 3 has been a pleasure, and I really look forward to coming back with Season 4, new guests, new topics, and I couldn't figure a better way to end Season 3 than having Frater Barrabbas on. So thank you again, sir, and other than that, we'll fade out with these last 3 commercial breaks. Thank you guys so much for listening, and have a great rest of your night. Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, the Telemancer. Let me first tell you a little bit about their owner, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about them. James Hunter Ralston has been a member of the Order of the Voltec, starting in 2008 and progressing through several degrees, last serving as head of the Outer Order. The Order of the Voltec is an offshoot of a pylon of the Temple of Set, originated to study and practice several forms of the sorceress methods centering on techniques used by Mexican and other Central American priests and magicians. Many of the techniques involved were popularized in the late 1970s and 80s by Carlos Castaneda. Over the decades since his first experience with magic,
His desire has grown into the creation and use of what other shamanic sorcerers term as power objects, talismans, amulets, totems, and other powerful objects. His interests expanded to the degree that he chose to become an apprentice of several Appalachia's premier craftspeople and learn the art of metalcraft to produce power objects for both himself and select patrons. He does work with gold, pewter, silver, and sometimes other metals as well. He has been doing this for over 8 years. He does create talismans, pendants, rings, altarpieces, and more, almost all exclusively by custom commission. And you can check out his stunning work at facebook.com/thetelemancer1. Again, that is facebook.com/thetelemancer1. All as one word. Thank you so much. Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Arachne Arcane Services. Arachne Arcane Services is a husband and wife duo comprised of Baron and Baronessa Arachne. With over 40 years of practical experience, they are masters of the occult arts through various practices and paradigms, such as necromancy, high magic, black witchcraft, and more. They are published authors under their own publishing house, the Arcane Press. They offer books, courses, spell work, consultations, ritual tools, and more. All of their products are handmade of the highest quality material and empowered through ancient rites. If you wish to know more about them or their business, or you require their services, please feel free to contact them at arachnearcaneservices.com. That is Arachne, ARAIGNEE, arcaneservices.com. And if you use promo code KOTN, you will get 10% off of your overall order or purchase as a special highlight of them being a sponsor of this show. Thank you so much, guys. Knights of the Nephilim podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Ars Gnosis. Ars Gnosis was formed by Diogo Cells Pimentel, an artist located in northeast of Brazil in the state of Bahia, which is the birthplace of the greatest artist in the country. Involved with occultism since 2009, starting in shamanic practices until reaching Western occultism through the paths of Luciferianism, Thelema, Goetic ceremonial magic, angelic and Enochian magic. Since 2017, he has added his art of drawing and painting to magical artifacts, putting the energy of his practice and personal research into the artistic and magical works that he creates. With the auspices of the great King Paimon that governs over all arts and sciences, you can find his work by searching Ars Gnosis on Facebook and Instagram. It is theurgical work channeled into magical tools made by an adept for adepts. Over time, his work has become known throughout the globe for the care and energy of the will applied to each and every piece that he creates. And with the motto that was propagated in greater proportion by Aleister Crowley, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," he applies the energy of the will of the initiatory path into each and every work. Once again, you can check him out by searching Ars Gnosis on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks, Diogo.